Good morning, everybody, and welcome to WorldDAB's first ever virtual General Assembly. My name is Patrick Hannon. I'm president of WorldDAB, and I'm here partly to introduce the day. So what I want to say is that we have a great lineup of speakers. I know people have put in an awful lot of effort in preparing their videos and their presentations. I think you'll find it really interesting and hopefully enjoyable. My job right at the beginning is to give an overview. And so what I'll be doing is, first of all, giving you a brief update on the latest developments for DAB+ around the world. And then I'll be outlining the things that we, as the WorldDAB steering board, have identified as our key priorities for the next 3 years. So without further ado, I'll start the presentation, and here we go. You see from the title, Strong Progress in Troubled Times. Clearly, the fact that we're having the virtual assembly is all to do with COVID. But the interesting thing is that we're actually doing quite well. 2020 was a good year for DAB+. Major markets continued to expand. A few highlights. Germany launched a second national multiplex in October. The UK DAB listening has actually overtaken FM for the first time. And Italy, since the beginning of this year, have had a law which requires all receivers to have DAB+. And we're seeing significant developments in many other countries. Belgium, Netherlands, Sweden, Czech Republic, Austria, and Australia all are expanding. And then we have France. France will have national DAB+ next year. It was going to be this year, but because of COVID, it's been delayed. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Nicolas Courion, who has been the driving force behind many of the developments that we've seen in the last 3 years. Nicolas is head of radio at the CSA, the French regulator, and he has been an inspiration, it's fair to say. And the first countries are switching off FM. As you probably all know, Norway switched off in 2017. What's interesting is that in this July, they actually had the highest levels of listening they'd had for many years. And Switzerland is next. They're planning to switch off between 2022 and 2023. And we'll be hearing more from both of those countries later today. And then when we take a step back and look at more broadly internationally, we'll see that Europe obviously very strong in the top left-hand corner, but we're getting pockets of interest increasing around the globe in North Africa, Middle East, Southern Africa, and Asia Pacific. So a lot of great progress, but now is the time to raise the bar. And we have 3 priorities: the case for DAB+, cars and consumer receivers, and finally new territories. So number 1, we need clear messages about DAB+ and the benefits for listeners, for broadcasters, and policymakers. So for listeners, it's pretty straightforward. DAB+ offers much greater choice. Here in North London, I tuned my radio last week, 152 stations on DAB and DAB+. And of course, clearer sound, particularly where FM is overcrowded. For broadcasters, first thing to remember is DAB+ preserves the core strengths of traditional radio. It's free to air, there's no third-party gatekeeper, and it's reliable in times of emergency. But it also offers opportunities, and in particular, one of the main opportunities, one of the key opportunity is the opportunity to build brands. So these are 3 examples from the UK. Absolute, you've probably all heard of many, many times. But it's worth noting Virgin Radio, Heart, all have very similar approaches. And so that they're able to segment their markets and have this bouquet of stations, which have allowed them to grow their audiences and increase revenues. And then the final point from the broadcaster's point of view is that DAB+ is key to securing radio's long-term position in the car. And there's really a 3-step approach to this. First of all, we have to make sure that DAB is actually in the car, and we'll be talking more about that later on today. We then have to make sure that we optimize the experience. And then finally, we're using DAB+ as a gateway to hybrid radio, where we're combining both DAB and IP to offer a holistic experience for the listener. And then for policymakers, In addition to the benefits that we've already talked about, I think the one thing I would highlight is that DAB Plus is the green solution. And the key message here is that DAB Plus consumes significantly less energy than FM. And again, we've got a presentation from the BBC on this topic later on. I think you'll find very interesting. So the second key priority is we need DAB Plus in all receivers, both cars and consumer. So to date, our primary focus has been on automotive. The European Electronic Communications Code requires all new car radios in the EU must be able to receive digital terrestrial radio. And as WorldDAB, we're monitoring the implementation of those laws, and I'll be speaking about that this afternoon. And the final thing to say is that having got DAB Plus into the cars, we need to make sure that the experience is optimized. Again, to repeat, positioning DAB Plus at the heart of hybrid radio. Now, when we look at consumer radios, the headline is too many are analog only. In Europe, 64%, so 2/3 of consumer radios sold today are still analog only. And this means a poor experience for listeners. It means that the adoption of DAB Plus is slowed unnecessarily, and it has a negative environmental impact. But a solution exists. And I mentioned at the start that Italy had introduced a law requiring all new radios to have DAB Plus. So that law took effect in January of this year. And you can see from this chart on the left, the impact this has had. Whilst other countries have been growing, or in the case of the UK, declining by about 10%, or in the newer markets, 50%, Italy sales have tripled in 2020. So the law really does have an impact, and it's a clear priority for WorldDAB and its members to push for similar laws in other territories. Our third priority is to drive the adoption of DAB Plus in new markets. We've seen what's happened in Europe. We're now looking at the rest of the world. And we've got three priority regions. We have Europe, Eurasia, Asia Pacific, Africa, and the Middle East. I should say that we also have had interest from parts of the Caribbean and Brazil, but these are our priorities. So taking each of those in turn, for Europe, really the key thing is, most countries actually have already launched, but there are some which have yet to launch national services. So Spain and Portugal, Greece, Romania, and Bulgaria, those are the countries with the largest populations. Some of them have trials, but we want to move to a full scale launch. Asia Pacific, the focus is on potential first movers. Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam being the ones that are all showing the greatest interest. And then finally, Africa and the Middle East. Again, we want to find the people who are going to move first, but specifically, we're looking at countries that are going to really act as leaders for their regions. So Tunisia actually has already launched, but we want to make sure that launch is successful and showcase that performance for other countries. In Southern Africa, South Africa clearly the most important market. And in terms of how we approach this, key part of our strategy is to work with partner associations. So for Europe, that's the European Broadcast Union, EBU. Asia Pacific, it's the ABU. And for Africa and the Middle East, ASBU, who are the Arab States Broadcasting Union. And in South Africa, NAB, that's the National Association of Broadcasters in South Africa. So to summarize, we have three key messages. Number one, DAB Plus is firmly established as the core future platform for radio in Europe. Number two, we still need to fight to have DAB Plus in all receivers. We've made great progress in cars. We need to see that through, and we need to make sure that the same thing happens for consumer receivers. And then finally, the next step is to take DAB Plus to new regions around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I hope this has given you a good feel for what's going on in the world and what the priorities are for WorldDAB. As I said at the beginning, we've got a great lineup of speakers for the rest of the day. They're going to be expanding on many of these themes. I hope to see you soon. Keep safe, and thank you for listening.